Cav Cop here. In this video, I want to go over my Masterpiece Arms 45, civilian legal version of the MAC-10 that was a popular machine pistol used in the 70s and 80s. The military ended up picking these up. Once again, the MAC-SOG SOG ended up using these. They used them in Vietnam for special operations, stuff like that. A lot of special operations units, SWAT teams, and military forces picked these up. And they still have them in inventory today as far as the original MAC-10s that had a sliding stock, and they also came with a two-stage suppressor on it that was pretty neat for the time. But machine pistols are something that have kind of gone away a bit, but there's something neat and unique. This one right here was bought during the 94 crime bill time frame. It was kind of a workaround to some of the government regulations of the time, but I bought it I think around 95, 96. It was like $200-300, but something that was unique and kind of filled a childhood fantasy dream type thing. Not practical at all, but we'll go inside. I'll show you how to take it apart and some of the features and functions of it and everything. Alright, so let's go over this Masterpiece Arms copy of the MAC-10. The magazine release is back here by the heel. It has a plastic grip panel on the back here that's attached to stamped sheet metal. Basically, most of the pistol is made out of stamped sheet metal for the upper and lower receiver. We'll get into that here in a moment. But you just push down. Magazine comes out. It's a standard military grease gun magazine, 45 caliber. When I was in the military, circa 1994-95, our mechanics were still using the grease guns, and they ended up turning in their grease guns, and they got the M4 rifles around that time before we in the infantry got it, which I was a little surprised about that. But nowadays, these magazines are a little more expensive and harder to find, but around 94, 95, when the crime ban went in, these things were like surplus, real cheap and easy to get a hold of, so it was kind of neat at that time. The Fox suppressor on here, it kind of works a little bit as a hand guard. They used to call it a hand warmer, but because this pistol is so heavy and short, they don't want people getting their hand forward on it to get hurt, so it kind of acts as a safety device or a little bit better control if you want to shoot it. It does heat up. On the original ones, they actually had a suppressor, and the suppressor was part of the original MAC-10s because it actually did give you a forward grip that you could hold on to. But the MAC-10 kind of set the standard for what a machine pistol is, and it doesn't have a forward grip. Back in the day, the Uzis had a forward hand grip on it and a folding buttstock. This had a sliding buttstock that folded over the top of it in the MAC-10 configuration, but it had a suppressor and basically became a machine pistol. The Uzi ended up making the micro Uzi, which is also a machine pistol, but the full-size Uzis were considered submachine guns. These were considered machine pistols. However, this is just a semi-automatic pistol for ATF's sake and everything. Suppressor was kind of neat because they got rid of the threaded barrel rule in the 90s from 94 crime bill. What they ended up doing for this is selling it initially without a magazine. They'd have the Fox suppressor for it, but it locked on, so you didn't have a threaded barrel, and it didn't come with a high-capacity magazine, but you could buy all that stuff readily. So I think I bought this probably around 96, 97, but mainly bought this because as a kid that grew up in the 70s and 80s, the movies had it as a pretty cool weapon, and this was kind of designed as a FU to the ATF saying, hey, we understand the rules you have. We're going to go ahead and make this pistol well within your regulations. It did almost get banned under the ATF 94 crime bill because they wanted to put a weight on pistols, and the Desert Eagle fought it. Because the Desert Eagle was a hunting pistol that was a heavy weight, the ATF ended up getting rid of the weight requirement. So that's one of the reasons this was able to be made. Once the crime bill sunsetted, then didn't become an issue. You can buy these with threaded barrels now and everything, but I wouldn't buy another one of these. More of a novelty item for me. There's a takedown pin in here. Punch it out. With this, you can use other objects if you need to. And this pin will pull out. It's got a little retaining washer on it. Let me get this real quick. Kind of awkward to pull it off like that, but it has a little metal detent in here. It's a good point to oil if you have one of these. And then it just has a little sliding collar sleeve. Then this other part will come off, and basically the two halves will separate. Just use this to punch it out a little bit. Basically pull this pin out right here, and that's the takedown part of it, is these two right here. Then this upper will basically come right off of it. Go over the upper here in a second. The lower receiver right here, Made out of stamped sheet metal. Even the sight is cut out as part of the sheet metal. And all they did was fold a piece of sheet metal, stamp it, make a little strip for the trigger part right here, and then stamped out the handguard and attached a little plastic clip on here. The screw takes off the back of this, and then you can take off the magazine catch and everything if you want it. The hammer trigger system in here, and the sear is back here a little bit, but if you pull the trigger, I don't know if you can see this part right here moving. That's basically where your sear is. So if you take the hammer, and it's similar to kind of like an AR-15 or M16 a little bit, but it locks back, and once it's back in place, you can just pull it, and that's what allows it to fire. You'll notice when this part right here goes down, then it'll release and allow it to go up. When the safety lever is rotated, this part right here is not able to move. Rotate it down, and it's able to move. But this is the basic of the lower receiver part of it. On the upper receiver, in order to take it apart, basically you slide this back. This is the retaining piece, and this piece right here comes out. On the original MAC-10 military models, the full auto ones, when it's in the forward position, it has little grooves here to allow you to see the sight. You could twist it and it would lock the bolt, so the bolt wouldn't move or slap around at all. But this piece right here comes out as the top part of the charging handle takedown. Then the rest of it basically slides out. Now, something to notice that's kind of neat, this and the Uzi have telescoping bolts, they call them. But the bolt itself is a little bit longer. Normally on a normal pistol or weapon, your bolt would end right here. Your bolt would not go over the barrel portion of it. So even though the barrel looks like it's kind of short, the barrel comes back and it's a good 4 or 5 inch barrel on here. When it goes forward, the bolt itself actually rides over the barrel. So they call it a telescoping bolt. And the Uzi and the MAC-10 or Masterpiece Arms pistol right here have that feature on it, which is semi-unique. I don't know, some other firearm places might end up using it. But this is basically your upper receiver part. Right here there's a pin. If you punch this pin out, basically fiddle around with it, you can get the barrel out. But the barrel is basically pinned in place, and then the muzzle brake on here kind of tightens it up a little bit. But it's basically another piece of stamped metal. Sights are just stamped metal welded on it. You can kind of see a little bit here maybe how it's just folded, stamped, cut sheet metal. A little heavier and thicker than normal stuff. Now right here, this captured recoil spring, so you don't have to worry about the recoil spring itself popping off. This rod here helps stabilize the back brace. Here is also the ejector, so if you push forward on it, you should be able to see it here, you'll see the ejector rod come out. So as the weapon operates, the ejector rod right here is going to keep popping rounds out. Now this piece right here does come out. It helps stabilize it a bit, and if you have any issues with it, just a pin steel thing, you can put it back in. You just have to make sure you line it up when the hole goes back in. And this big heavy piece of metal right here basically just operates as a blowback. And this right here is where it, like I said, it fits around the barrel and everything, becomes a telescopic bolt and just rams it home and keeps firing. But it's a pretty neat design, real cheap and easy to make. They made a whole bunch of these for the military and law enforcement and all different groups, but it never really caught on. It was more something that was a spray and pray type weapon with very limited uses. But these are still in inventory on military bases and with police departments. Like I said, my police department I used to work for, they still had one, and we used it to go shooting and stuff like that once a year just to burn up ammo and everything. But very reliable pistols overall. Let's get things cleaned up a little bit and I'll put it back together. Alright, so let's put this thing back together. See how well it works with a camera angle like this. But basically you take it, put your bolt piece back in. You want to take the top part right here where the hole is that you took the charging piece out, and it basically sits right down in here. Give it a little bit of a twist with its rails, and it'll slide forward, and it's basically locked into place. Let's see how we can do this. And then you want to grab the upper receiver part right here and the lower. You want to push them in and back. Let me get this off screen here for a second. And the pin will slide in. Then you're going to take the other retaining pin, going from the top, and you want to hold a little bit of pressure on the bottom of it. Push the pin in, make sure it locks into place. That's basically it. It's put back together. But this is the safety on it. It rotates. You have fire, allows it to fire. You have safe. Like I said, it'll still charge. There's no way to lock the bolt back to the rear at all. It's just basically a reciprocating firearm, and all it does is go back and forth and cycle. But it's a real reliable firearm for how well it works. It's just not the most accurate, and weighing in at about 7 to 8 pounds with the magazine and a muzzle device on it. It's not something you can really hold in your hand, point and aim that well. More of a novelty item, but to me it was something that I wanted to have ever since I was a little kid watching movies, and since I'm able to own a copy of it, I'm happy with that. If I had the money, I'd probably end up buying a real MAC-10, just because it's one of those things that to me is kind of neat and cool. No real practical use to it, but just something neat to have. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just kind of give a overview of the MAC-10, a little bit of information on it. Been used in tons of movies, from Steve McQueen. The Duke used it, I think, in was the movie McHugh. John Wayne, the Duke, ended up using it in movies with Chuck Norris. It was a real popular thing. Lone Wolf McQuade and dozens of others. If there's any action movies that were made in the 80s, somewhere in there was probably a MAC-10. Big Trouble Little China, stuff like that. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you would, make sure you like, subscribe, and share these videos. Cav Cop out.